Old man skills for days. Okay, so tonight, what are we going to do? Tonight, we are going to, like I said, build on some of the work that Rich has laid for the last couple of weeks, talking about different open guards. So he covered lasso guard, X guard, and I think spider guard are the three that he's kind of touched on in the last few weeks. And then on Monday, it sort of did a bit of a deep dive into lasso most recently. So I'm going to take this sort of look at, we're going to take this look at open guard that Rich has sort of been going through for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to pair it with the discussion that we've had over the last few weeks with me about controlling the box. So I'll just review it nice and quick, predominantly for my two new guys, but also just to kind of put it fresh in our brains. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at a match between Almeida Bjj, so Marcus Almeida Bjj, and Nicholas Magali, who are two of like the best in the world at the moment. Bjj is like a guard passing monster, and Marigali is a guard playing monster. And so it's a nice kind of matchup, and we're going to use Marigali's guard game to kind of have a look at how we're doing. DM, I don't know who that is. Maybe Dave. Cheeky. Okay, so here we go. Stand by while I pull off old man skills. Potentially.
Yeah. Shit, I'd hate to see my skills, what they're called.
Wait, you got, hey, look at me go. Okay, I should be able to. Hey. All right, here we go. So, quick refresher is last couple of weeks. Oh, I want that to be bigger, don't I? Last couple of weeks, we talked about using a box to sort of understand controlling position. Yeah. So here's a head, here's some hips and some legs, here's some arms. That looks like a diaper, but for our purposes, we got what we need. And what we've covered is like in side control and in hang on. Not good old man skills. In side control and in mount, we sort of talked about how if I can control two of the corners of my opponent, so either both the shoulders or both the knees or like one side, if I can make that happen with my points of control, then I can kind of pin the person to the ground, and I can use that as a way of understanding how those positions, like side control and mount, how I can use all the different sort of sub positions of that, like low mount, monkey mount, high mount, Z mount, all those kind of things. And so we've gone over that a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to expand that. I'm just going to delete all of this because I don't like any of it. Okay, so we're going to expand that a bit, and we're going to look at how we could apply that same kind of box principle to understand a bit about open guard, and how I guess a nice way to start thinking about open guard in terms of how I'm now playing open guard. So I've got, sleeve and collar or lasso or butterfly guard or X guard or any of those kind of not closed guard versions. And it still applies to closed guard, to be honest, but closed guard sort of by its very function locks you into it, whereas open guard has a lot more decisions to make. So how we can understand this box and how it kind of lets us piece together and problem solve if something's going wrong. And so broadly, what I want you to understand out the gate is all of the open guards, all guards will adhere to what is effectively the same principles around controlling this box. So for instance, if I have a closed guard on someone, I've got my legs wrapped around them here. This is me over this way. There I am. And so I'm controlling the bottom two corners. Yeah, I'm controlling their hips with my legs. If I've got something like a sleeve and collar guard, in which case I've got a lapel controlled here. I've got their arm controlled with my arm here. And then I've got another foot up in this position here. So this kind of all comes back to some sort of homogeneous person over here. Then I'm controlling those top two corners of them. Yeah. So I can control, bottom corners with closed guard. I can control top corners with sleeve and collar. If I was controlling with like an X guard, then, I would be underneath them. This is going to absolutely test my drawing abilities here for a second. kind of looks like this. Nailed it. And so in X guard, I'm controlling the bottom two corners, right? And so very, very simplistically, I can think of different guard positions as how they control the different corners of a person. And that's useful because what it lets me do is go, okay, if I'm in, my sleeve and collar or any guard, and I want to control these specific corners, if my controls start to break down, like, so let's say that I'm in lasso guard, like Richie covered over the weekend, on Monday. If I'm in my lasso guard here, great drawing by me, I know that I've, predominantly got my control on this corner. And then if I'm looking to do, sweep or something, potentially I'm going after one of these bottom corners. So I'm looking to, sweep the person over here or kind of into one of those directions. If I lose one of those two controls, then I need to be thinking about, okay, I either need to get out of this position or I need to reestablish that control. And so the point that Jara made on Monday night, which was, hey, I've been taught to use lasso guard as a way to kind of mitigate losing a point of control with my sleeve and collar. That's a really nice example, right? Like your sleeve and collar guard, you should control the two top corners. You should be holding these two corners. If this one gets taken away because they pummel the hand and feed their leg between their legs, your leg between their legs, then suddenly you've lost a point of control and you're kind of left just dangling on one corner. And so the solution to that is change to a different guard that gives you a lot of good options without that point of control. Making sense? Excellent work. Does anyone have any questions about that? Ripper. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I think that's probably explained that well enough. Stop sharing this for a second. Sorry. Okay, you should all be looking at a jiu-jitsu match with a dude in blue, with a guy in white sitting above him, and then a nice looking gentleman in a suit. Yeah? All right, lovely. Should be muted. Okay. And Greg's, yeah, good. All right. Looking good. We're going well so far. Here we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at this match between Merigali and Bjj. Bjj is the dude in blue, and Merigali is the guy in white. And we might just call them blue and white for a little bit potentially, or I might try and keep butcher their Portuguese names. I don't know how I feel. I'm just going to show you this first little bit. This is not particularly relevant, but it's a cool sweep, and it'll kind of give you an idea as to why the point of the match that we're starting in has occurred. It's a really tasty little sweep, and in fact, we can we can extrapolate the concept to this point as well, but let's not. So Marigali's just been swept and he's landed on his back. And what I want you to see here is that he is now framing his ass off to stop Bjj's shoulders coming up. So his feet in this position can't reach to control Bjj's hips. So he can't get his feet into a position to control down here. He also can't get his feet into a position to control up here. But what he can do is use his arms to frame out those two top corners. And so because he can straight arm, stiff arm both shoulders, he can stop Bjj from advancing up on him. Not the most efficient or beautiful way to make it happen, but what he's able to do is kind of slow the whole advance of Bjj down. And so by controlling those corners, let's say he doesn't have a guard. That's probably a bit of a stretch at this point, but by controlling those corners, he's able to then start to rebuild his guard. And what I want you to watch over the next couple of seconds is Merigali rebuilds his guard, and then he gets to a point where he switches to becoming offensive again. And we're just going to have a chat about that. Just going to let this kind of work through. Boom. Okay. And now he's back on the offense. Yeah. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're just going to have a look at how Marigali's built through the corners, controlling those, those four corners in some fashion, and gotten to a point where he can start to launch his offense again because he's got a guard back in place. He's got control of Bjj's corners. So, okay. that's the first step there. So you can see that Merigali's, what's that, his right foot has just popped out here. And so now he's in a position where he's kind of scissoring this leg. And so what he's done is he's taken some ability to control that near side hip, yeah, near to us. And so now that he's got that, oh dear, that's better. Now that he's got that, then what he does is he uses it to sort of kick out. Let's not try to break down the technique dramatically here, but he kicks himself out and he's managed to square himself up so that now his left foot is able to start to block that left corner. So what he's gone is he's gone from controlling the Bjj's left hip to being able to get onto both of his hips with his feet. So do you remember moments ago I said, hey, his legs aren't in a position where he can control Bjj's hips. Now he's blocked one hip escaped out, and he's got a point on two hips now. So now he's controlling the left hip through like a shin to shin position probably. But I just need you to understand, you know, for our purposes, his left leg now controls in some fashion Bjj's left hip. His right leg is now blocking Bjj's right hip. And now you can see his hands. He's able to start to use his hands a little bit more. Cool. And now he's building himself into a bit of a De La Riva guard. All right. And so now he's back into his offense. Is that making sense? So you can see he's gone from like framing out two corners and then able to kind of build himself back up. So he now has positive control of all the corners, and now he's able to launch his offense. Now, probably the question I would ask if I was in your seat is, Tristan, why does Merigali have no real control probably over these two corners? And you're telling me that he's controlling all four corners. Yeah, he clearly isn't. Like, he's got pretty obvious positive control here. He's got some degree of control on that with the De La Riva hook. This deep hook here is maybe doing a bit on that far hip, but, you know, as a minimum, he definitely has nothing affecting this shoulder, and he's got, you know, less so something affecting that shoulder. And so what I'm going to tell you is, if you think in terms of how that box of Bjj is angled, you can see that Bjj's right shoulder and his right hip are now leading. And so his left shoulder and his left hip are well out behind him. Yeah. So he's kind of, I'm doing stuff in the tiny little thing here. So now he's very much bladed to make this his leading edge. And then everything behind that is kind of aligned facing back in that direction. Yeah. So he's no longer square, like both of his shoulders aren't square to Merigali. He's turned himself off. And by turning Bjj's shoulders like that, it means that he limits the directions that Bjj can approach. So if you're thinking in terms of passing here, Bjj needs to square his hips up, square his shoulders up, so he can start to move laterally side to side. At the moment, he can't move well side to side. He can sort of go front to back, but it's going to keep him aligned to Merigali. And so one way to think about that would be to think in terms of like a T position, yeah? Meh, and then Bjj is kind of facing in this direction. So you can see it's a little clunky, but predominantly Bjj is kind of facing off, you know, maybe more over here is a little fairer. Let me get rid of this. So Bjj is kind of facing in this direction, whereas Merigali is facing in this direction. So you can see that Merigali, gentleman in the white, has got like the angle on Bjj. So not controlling, let's call it directly with like actual grips, four corners, but he has control of all four corners because the two on the distance from him, the two far from him, aren't able to come and affect him. And what he's going to be looking to do is stopping those corners from coming back to turn into him. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hey, Tristan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, can you just rewind it? Because that's really interesting, because you described it from the sorry, on my phone, I can't see.
Oh, he's just muted himself. Hang on. We'll ask him to unmute himself. Trav, you just muted yourself, man. So I got like, I can't see and then nothing.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. Go.
Yeah. So, you know, that was really well described what the person in white did. Can you just rewind it? I want to see where the guy in blue kind of lost it a little bit before. He was sort of in control, wasn't he?
Yeah. Okay, so
and then I just want to can you just get just for me, because I just want to see something.
yeah. So this is kind of
Yep. Hang on. Why can't I see, why
part
can't I
for
see the
Bjj.
video? Can
Oh,
everyone
no,
see the
can you
video,
see it now?
or am I the only one that can't? Must be the only one that can.
I can see it.
Okay, cool. All right. So I'll
I
just
can
go
see
back. It's me. Redback instructor has started. Yeah, we get that. Screen sharing. Okay. Oh, it's dropped. Okay, cool. So, is there a bit before this? Just because
Yeah,
I'd
so
argue.
here you go. So it's kind
Sorry
of
about this.
no, that's all right, man. So they're kind of stuck in this position for a little bit. So I'll play the back end of this for you.
So I'm just thinking, because you described it very well, how the person underneath got back control, got his legs in, and was good. And then I was thinking, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking, well, if I was the guy in blue, when did I start? When should have I changed my game? Realized I'd lost, like started losing positions. Like he's probably thinking it now, and maybe. He's sort of clinging to him. He's really tying him down with his legs, and he's really, what do you call that? Sort of like that python sort of grip around everything. But yeah, and so is there a bit before this? I just want to.
Not really. So he kind of sweeps it,
really.
and then they land like that. So he kind of sweeps him and ties his legs up.
So he swept the guy in white. Yeah. So I guess my point is, he swept the guy in white, so he's got 2 points for the sweep, and now he's going up the middle, up the center, doing that sort of, that thing. And then that allowed this guy to control the corners, as you said, and get his knees back into play. So in a way, that pass that the guy in blue was doing, I've seen that in the school numerous times. People do it, but by the guy in white controlling the corners and get his legs back in, he actually defeated that. So I was just thinking the guy in blue should have went, oh, hang on a second, this isn't working for me. I need to change my game here. But I know they're world champions or whatever. But yeah, it's just interesting. No worries.
Sweet.
Yep, sweet.
Okay. So we're just going to roll on a little bit further. Okay, so he's bladed Bjj there. And then what I want you to see is now, we're just going to watch Bjj work a little bit, just, I guess, I'm just going to let it play for a couple of minutes or so, or a minute or so. I just want you to watch how Meregali keeps trying to either keep Bjj bladed and keep control of those corners, and what Bjj is doing to try and square his hips up. So see how he's constantly like pummeling that left foot down and trying to step his left foot square. Meregali is like keeping him bladed and trying to keep that position, whereas Bjj is trying to square his hips. And see, bam, there, he's able to square his hips up. So he's able to get his hips in and get control. And so what you can see now is Meregali's, still keeping control of all the corners. And what he actually does there is he switches himself to a lasso guard. Yeah, it's a shallow lasso, but he steps that left foot on there because now what he's trying to do is twofold. That the shallow lasso lets him control the distance so he can leg press Bjj off him, but it also means that it blocks Bjj from being able to continue passing to the left. So we sort of talked on Monday about how if Bjj keeps going this way and this lasso guard over here does its thing, he'll kind of walk himself into a sweep. So by putting that lasso guard in, even though Bjj has managed to square his hips up, he's almost like, let's call it like functionally removed that continuation of the pass to the other side. So it's relying on some decision-making from Bjj at this point, but it's stopping that continuation of movement to the left from being a good option. So he's controlling the corner, he's controlling the corners, because if Bjj kept going that way, he would sort of open and sweep it. It's maybe a little conceptual, but yeah, that's what's going on. Jared's nodding like he knows what's up. So, and so is Adrian. So I'll take it.
100.
Okay.
What's going on? That's good.
So now you can see he's kind of backed himself back out, and what he's gone to do is get back into like he's rebuilt his controls here. So here he's kind of crushed. It's not amazing. So now you can see he shifts out and then controls. Oh man, I didn't mean to click back there. Sorry. Shifts back out and goes to control the corners again. Yeah. So now he's controlling both the hips and he's kind of rebuilding the position now. Cool. And then he builds himself into close guard.
Yeah. So he actually used the lasso to gain back the control of the shoulders to actually get back into something else. He wasn't going for a sweep. It looks like he was going for close guard, wasn't it?
Yeah. this is probably a nice little sequence to think in terms of, I guess, for Greg to like show you something that probably has a degree of context for you now is lasso guard to control the top shoulders. So you can see now his control has gone from controlling the hip and having him bladed. Bjj is squared up. He goes to a lasso guard. He goes to a cross collar grip with his left hand. So I'm miming these things when I can just draw on them. So lasso guard controls this shoulder. You can probably see in here, this grip controls over here. And so he's shifted his control from the like near side blade to the top shoulders. And then as he lets the like builds through the positions, he builds himself into controlling the hips with the close guard. So now he's sort of controlling the top shoulders and then opens his legs and pulls into a close guard. So he's worked through controlling a number of different corners of Bjj to get himself into a nice offensive guard like close. Is that kind of making sense? And so I think there's a couple other things we'll go to, but I think the thing I want you to understand from this is if you think in terms of those four corners of your opponent's shoulder, it can help you understand when and why you would change guards. So one of the things that undoes people a lot when they're playing open guard is they'll hold on to something far too long and they'll sort of watch the person walk past their guard when they should have moved to something else. And it's hard to say, I guess it's hard to have a decision when you're on the person on the ground to have a decision point where you're like, oh, I should have changed guards at that point. And as you get more experience, you kind of find your timing. But by understanding that, hey, I just need to control these four corners, you can start to think in terms of, okay, I wasn't, I was controlling here. Now that that's changed, I need to make an adjustment to control some different corners. I feel like I'm saying corners a lot, but it should at least give you like a bit of a pattern to start to think in terms of how you can move around. All right. In a second, what we're going to see now, beautiful segue, Tristan. We're going to see Bjj stands up and Meregali go from closed to open guard. And I want you to see how he goes from controlling the hips to controlling the shoulders of Bjj. So we'll see it in, where are we? We'll see it in a second. Here he goes. So Bjj is going to stand up for us. You're going to see Meregali switching. I think he controls the shoulders. I might have lied to you just then. Yeah, perfect. Okay, can you see how he's gone? So the closed guard has been opened. Yeah, Bjj has stood up. Meregali's lost the closed guard, and you can see that he's kind of retracted his limbs back, and now he's built a lasso guard, and he's got collar grips again. So as opposed to like letting the guard go up, let his legs crack open and kind of fall to the ground in a heap where Bjj can just run past him, he's opened himself up and kind of retracted back and then attacked those two shoulders to give himself a guard that he can actually fight out of there.
So
now,
Tristan.
Oh yeah, great, please.
So question. On Monday, my takeaway from Richie's call was that lasso guard, one of the defining features was getting that deep shin on lat type action. Yep. I'm not really seeing that here. Is this still a lasso or is this something else?
No, that's a good question, mate. This would be what's called a shallow lasso guard. So you can see that Meregali's foot is in the right spot to go and like dig into a lasso. I would say what he's doing here is kind of like he's getting some of the benefit of having his foot on the shoulder, and he's very close to being able to thread into a proper lasso guard. So he's kind of like half in, half out, insofar as he's put it to a good position where he can make a decision based on what Bjj does. And so I'd say like at this level, the positioning of the foot is a threat that drives decisions out of Bjj. Whereas like if you're rolling with someone who doesn't really know what's going on, you kind of put your foot there, they'll just like blindly walk themselves around the corner and then it threads through for you into lasso guard and kind of hits the sweep. Yeah, so it's more of a, I don't want to use that chess analogy overly, but it's more of like he's made a move with an understanding of the consequences of that for Bjj.
Yeah, so he's putting it down there as a threat.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
But you're correct. Like I'm using the term lasso guard probably a little too broadly. That would be like a shallow lasso. Okay, we can actually, well, you can't really see it, but what he's actually done on the far side is he's actually dug a really freaking deep lasso. So this is our Meregali's foot on the back here. You can actually see the grip that he's got. I'll just get rid of that line. You can see the grip he's got here on Bjj's trouser. So he's actually gone and dug a lasso and then he's threaded all the way through and actually put it out the back of his hip. So where Richie talked about You thread over, go into the armpit. Maragali's actually gone over and under into like behind the hips. So it'd be like I don't know, a very deep lasso guard, I suppose. I'm sure it's got a better name than that. But so he's actually put both of his feet up, kind of shallow lassoed both. And then on the right side where he's had space, he's dug this like really, really very deep lasso guard. And what I want you to see now is, so what he's got is he's committed Bjj's weight onto his left hand. So we're going back to this idea of corners, yeah? Bjj's corner here, so his left shoulder is committed to the ground. He's pinned it to the ground with Bjj's weight. Yeah, he's elevating him and pinning Bjj's hand to the ground. So he's controlled that corner. He's got that ridiculously deep lasso guard over here. I'm sorry, I've given you the wrong hands. Bjj's left hand is lassoed. Yeah, he can't post with it. And then Meregali has pushed him over in towards that dead corner. And so now he's having to put his right hand there to stop himself from falling. So this is Bjj's right hand because his left hand is like dug in through here and unable to go and post where it needs to be. So Meregali's controlled he's controlled that like far right corner really well. And differently from like playing on your back where you can't fall over, when you're standing, you can be swept over one of your four corners. Yeah, like in terms of like sweeping, we often talk, hey, two corners or control at two corners, but because you're standing, you can just fall over one corner. That's okay. You're allowed to do that. So what you're going to see here is now he goes under, he's going to do it in a second. Cheeky bugger. I think he's going to do it in a second. Okay, so he switched back to that sort of much deeper lasso. Now he's gone back underneath. Sweet. Okay, and so you can see now that whole sequence we watched right at the start of when we started discussing how he's controlling one whole side of him and blading Bjj. He's done exactly the same thing on the opposite side. So now he's controlling Bjj's left hip, his left shoulder, and now he's driving him over in, bugger. Oh, this is actually pretty useful. Here. That's a good spot. Now he's controlled this whole side of him and he's driving him this way. And so Bjj is kind of running away from that because he doesn't want to fall over those two kind of dead corners now. I swear to God, there's a sweep coming up. No, he swept him somehow. Sweep happened earlier in the match. Okay, so this is the thing that I'm going to show you. So he's trying to sweep him that way. The sweep that I was thinking about happened to touch earlier in the match. But now what I want you to see is this. So he's trying to sweep him over those corners. You can see Bjj is doing a bunch of stuff. And then what I want you to watch is how Meregali ends up losing all of his control of those four corners on Bjj. Yeah, so back to our sort of idea. One shoulder here, one shoulder over here, one hip here, one hip over here. At the moment, he's got this hip controlled with this leg. He's got this shoulder controlled with this lasso guard here. He's got a grip over here controlling this corner. And then he's got his De La Hiva hook in over there. So you can see he's got like, I think I've done that okay. He's got all four limbs on all four corners. And what I want you to watch is pretty quickly, Bjj kind of dismantles those control points. Just a little timer. So you see how he dismantles all the control points there? We'll just go back a tiny little bit. And Meregali's left with just one point of control. Don't worry too much about the sort of technical aspect of how he's pulled it off. But see here, I'm just going to move you guys for a moment. Bjj is almost completely free of Meregali's control. Yeah, like Meregali's got one grip left. He's got this, you bastard. He's got that one little grip left and he's lost everything else. So in this instance, he's able to kind of drag it back in, lasso and control corners again. Yeah, so he kind of rebuilds the whole thing. We're just going to jump ever so slightly forward because now these guys basically just go back and forward with Meregali trying to control corners and sweep and Bjj trying to free up the corners of his body. And what I want you to see is around about here. Just let that load for a second. So what you're going to see in a second is, again, Meregali kind of loses controls of Bjj's corners, and you're going to see that Bjj is able to just run past him. So you'll see the moment where it all kind of frees up and Meregali just has one hand hanging onto Bjj and nothing else. In a second. Boonk. All right, see that point right, like it doesn't have any control over him anymore. And you can see that he no longer has a mechanism to control Bjj going in this direction. And so as soon as that's happened, Bjj is obviously a very good jiu-jitsu player. So the moment that's occurred and he's able to break the grips, he's going to blast through on a pass and look to pass over the top of him. Conveniently for our demonstration purposes, Meregali does a really nice job of kind of keeping himself in the middle ball. And you can see he's gotten back under Bjj and he's gotten back under control of one of those points in the hips. And then you're going to see it kind of tries to fall apart. But what I want you to see from that is Meregali tries to get control of the corners of Bjj back. So Bjj kind of breaks the position, gets himself free, passes. Meregali struggles to try to get back under control of the Bjj's corners. You can see he kind of frees all the grips and he's able to get himself past. Like that. How am I doing on time? That's probably pretty solid. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment now. That's kind of the crux of it. What I wanted to show you was if you think in terms of those corners and you think in terms of open guard, it gives you a nice way of understanding where you need to be putting your control and why you need to be putting it there and how you can blade your opponent to just control one side. If they square up, you need to switch how you're doing it. You can control the hips, you can control the shoulders, you can control one side of them. And it probably gives you a way, once you sort of understand what some of the different open guards do, of understanding why you would need to move from one open guard to another open guard and sort of the timings that you would look to do that on. Discussion / question time. Go. Just all stare at me blankly. That's the best.
Would you say that you need sort of 2 points of control at a minimum for an effective open guard?
I think so, man. I think you need at least 2 points of control to control a guard. I think if you want to be attacking, it probably at least needs to be 2. Like even if you think about the lasso guard, you insert that hook, but then when you actually go to sweep, you've spun sideways and you've grabbed their hip, like you've gotten their hip in some way at the leg. And if you think about all the videos that Richie showed us, most of them, like the Galval one sort of stands out to me, where Galval kind of shifted his hip and heavy onto the hook.
Yep.
So he's committed the guy down onto that one side. You can see he's kind of controlling more than just one of the corners of the dude. So yeah, I think if you're down to 1 point of control, that's a good sign that it's not going well.
All right. What about single leg X guard?
Yeah.
Would that be 2 because you're sort of controlling both sides of the hips?
Yeah. So I think that probably, my analogy has some limitations. I'd say if you think in terms of the same way you would think of sleeve and collar, in single leg X, you're wrapped around one of their legs, but for it to be effective, then you want to be making them sort of fight for their balance. And because they're fighting for their balance, you're committing that other corner to do something.
Right.
If you're standing in someone's single leg X and they're just wrapped on your leg, but it's not giving you any problems, you just fight their hands and pass the guard. Yeah. So their point of control is just one corner. Whereas if they're rocking you forward, putting your hands to the ground, making you step and work, you're making them commit those other corners. And so you're kind of controlling those other corners. And so that's probably a nice way to think of those guards like single leg X and X guard, where you've got let's call it a direct contact to one of the corners. But for it to be effective, you want to be making them use the other corners of their body to deal with the guard. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, sweet. Cool. It's a good question, Jared.
You can control the corner too by in single leg X, in X guard, because you've got the foot on this side, near side, and then you've got the hips over there. In a way, you're controlling the corners through that foot.
Yeah,
and that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think Danaher, some of the stuff you showed us a little while ago, Trav, with single leg X, Danaher talks about hey, when you're in your single leg X position, that back foot goes and covers the other buttock, the other hip, so that they can't keep moving it. So you've got it's tentative, but it's a point of control on that other hip.
Yeah, no, good. Hey, I'm really interested because The lasso, I think I've been doing it a bit shallow, right? And I've done it, we've all played with it, and you can tie them up, but I'm going to really have it in my own mind, a definitive, well, shallow's good for this and deep's good for that. And that's what this has made me think is I can't actually answer that. I know that on Monday night it was deep, and I could just see that guy had real control over his opponent. This guy tonight, it was shallow, but he was really using it, like you said, to control a point of the square to get to somewhere else. So I don't feel that he was really going to do anything with, well, I don't know, and it's a bit jittery out here. So I don't feel that he was really looking for a sweep, but he may be, you know what I mean? Like to you, he may have been looking like he was going to sweep him, but yeah. So I'm really, it's kind of sparked an interest in exploring it just for my own. Okay, yeah, I can really get that leg in, and guys like or anyone who's got legs can stick a leg in deep or stick it in shallow. I mean, it's quite an interesting thing to play with.
Yeah, I think that shallow lasso, when you press it onto that shoulder, it kind of functions a bit like a spider hook, where you can control forwards and backwards with it. Yeah, like you've got a grip, you've got a point of contact, so you can kind of control that shoulder forwards and backwards. You can alleviate pressure. Like if they drive directly into you, you just leg press them. But it also means that if they start to work that corner, you can actually just drop your foot in, and then you're into that kind of lasso sweep.
And the other one was it does stop the guard pass to, as you said, to his left, because you all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm not going left anymore because you've got my right hand, you've got my right shoulder. So it's really this is really good what we're doing, and I want to see. I was thinking we might be back quicker, but anyway, the point is when we're back on the mat, we can actually highlight a lot of this and say, look, we need guys doing this. We need to break. Like it's going to be good on the mat. I can see us evolving further down this line. This thinking.
Does anyone else have any questions that they wanted to sort of ask about tonight? Greg or Dane or Adrian? No, it's okay. You don't have to ask questions. There's no pressure. Is there any kind of things that I guess around the concept that I've used? Is there anything that doesn't make any sense, or can you think of a way that you would potentially apply it, like or a time where you're like, oh yeah, I did get past, and I can kind of think of a time where it was because I didn't have control of those points? Like, can you sort of put it back into your game at some point? You have to answer me. I'm just prompting a sort of thought in your brains.
Don't know about that. I guess maybe an observation from mine, and just on the comment or discussion you had with Jared just then, the concept of direct control and indirect control of your corners. Obviously, relatively inexperienced. I think there's a lot of emphasis on direct control, but obviously, indirect control is also viable.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'd say that you could probably subcategorize it into like there's some technique you can use that basically attacks the knowledge of your opponent. So you do a thing and they know that presents a certain type of risk, and so you're sort of banking on them making a decision that you can predict. That relies on them making like good decisions, and so sometimes you'll see people who are quite experienced rolling with very new people and having quite a hard time because they're doing things. They're like, I put my foot there, man. You should never do that thing you just did. And then the inexperienced person's like, woo, just blast through it. And they're just not quite ready for the like full commitment to the horrible idea that their opponents just had. And so I think that can kind of feel a bit disconcerting when you're getting a bit better. And probably, that like, I don't know, 12 to 18, 24 month mark where you're starting to see or like learn predicted responses from your opponent. And so part of that is like an attack on the thinking of your opponent. And then there's also that physical way to indirectly affect corners, which is like blading your opponent and kind of cutting an angle and getting a flank. And I guess, no, I don't guess that idea of like getting to a flank of your opponent is ubiquitous across combat sports, right? It's in boxing, it's in wrestling, it's in jiu-jitsu, it's in everything. getting that angle is like the path to victory. You need to angles in a guard game. The angles you generate are often a lot smaller, or they start very small. And so I think when you're starting out, understanding that trying to just get an angle is a really nice place to start. So as opposed to thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough yet to try to control, corners indirectly, I'd actually say to you, you know what, I guarantee you it's a good idea to get an angle. Go try and do it. Go to try to get to their left. They'll do some things that'll mess it up from time to time, but just the process of doing that and kind of learning what it's like to get angles is actually a really good initial place to go to try and get experience there quickly.
Cool.
I don't know if that answered your question, Greg. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good, it builds on what I was thinking. And you make an interesting point, and one that I often feel uncomfortable with in a martial arts sphere is I can see why you might want to force or encourage your opponent into a particular move or in a particular direction.
Yeah.
As you say, unless you've rolled with them a lot, or if you've watched them a lot, it can be a low percentage maneuver on your part, because you're basically leaving it up to them to make that decision on your behalf.
Yeah, I really agree with that, Greg. I think you're ceding the initiative to your opponent, and I think that you want to be a lot better at them where you're going, right? Like you want them to go to a spot or start to try and attack in a means or a direction that you are pretty confident you know much more than them about. Like if you pull guard on someone and put a lasso in, you kind of want to know that you're better at fighting lasso guard than they are at passing, because it's a horrible experience when you're like, lasso guard guy, and he's like, this is what I pass every day, bam. And so I agree, like it's probably the thing that it's a bit of a tension in jiu-jitsu, right? There's this sort of cultural idea of like, oh, it's about going with the flow and kind of fighting, like letting your opponent give you energy and using it against them. But in another way, it's not, right? Like just attack them, drive the pace, drive the initiative, and drive mistakes out of them. So as opposed to having them make a decision and you respond to it, force horrible decisions from them and then just crush those horrible decisions. And I think if both instances attack the decision-making of your opponent to some extent, one of them I'm much more comfortable with, because I'm like, you're going to make heaps of bad decisions and I'm going to make you make them, and then I'll pick the one that I like, not, God, I hope you make one bad decision that I like the look of.
Yeah. Cool.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, man. Yeah, of course.
Is that different to creating dilemmas in such that, like, rather than like, I'm thinking of like, if you hip bump sweep someone and they defend that, you go to a different move. I was just thinking, would that be different to then trying to bait someone into making a mistake that's sort of provoked?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think the idea of the dilemma is that the most likely response to the first thing you're doing. And so you hip bump them, you know that they're probably going to do X or Y. And so you're just looking for that to attack off. And so that's probably more of you're driving expected responses. It's not always going to be there, right? They can do unexpected shit or have a different response they use, but you're attacking to try and generate response that you're then going to subsequently attack. Because against someone good, you should reasonably expect their first response to be excellent, their second response to be all right, their third response to be meh, and then fourth and fifth are getting worse and worse because they're sort of running out of good decisions, and they're getting further and further out of position to have that decision work well. I don't know if that's getting too conceptual, but yeah, I think it's the same idea. It's the same idea. Nailed it. Cool.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. The dilemma, because what you want to do, it's similar but also different. So the dilemma is, so you do something and there's two responses, and you know that, and they're both shitty. All right, so here's how I play it. I give them something and there's two shitty responses, and they have to choose. Like, I'm actually, when I think of, when I think of dilemma, and you can apply it anywhere. Actually, that's I'm taking that away tonight as well. But what I'm trying to say in the submission area, I'm giving them two response. Like, if I go for a triangle, if I'm going and I've got a figure 4 or a triangle happening, they go, shit, there's two dilemmas here. I've given them, they got to defend if they defend the triangle or defend the figure 4, I'll get the triangle. So I'm reading a little bit more into the dilemma bit. I'm just saying you can roll, the dilemma for me is to create two shitty positions for them to deal with, that they have to, I'll get them on one of them. But what you're saying too, which is good, I'm taking this away as well, is, and what Tristan was saying is, you're creating, doesn't have to be two shitty responses that I will get something with. It's going to be two responses that I can deal with, or the third one will be crap anyway. So I think dilemma rolling is really good, and I think if we can also do that, where you're setting up things knowing that you know the road, there's a fork in the road, there's two responses here and they're both terrible, take one and I'm going to deal with it. That's pretty cool. But no worries.
I think it's a really good point, Trav. Like, I think when you think probably I guess the concept of dilemma is maybe applied at like quite a close to the set of end game, to the finish. So it's like, hey, it's a triangle or an armbar. Pick your poison. Whereas I think, I've sort of thought about it, or I've discussed it to you in a way that's much earlier, where it's like, hey, neither choice necessarily has to be a finish. Neither of them is the end of the match, but they're both like, you're sort of running, decisions against each other until you get to the end game. Yeah. So, I think that's.
Yep. You're right. That's exactly right. You've articulated it well. Like, it is. I'm thinking the end game, as in there's two areas here. I'm going to get you on one of them, but this is all before then, and it's running. And the only way you get that before bit is pulling a lasso, Greg, putting it on and going, shit, what do they do? Because I say to everyone, especially in the morning class, I know Tristan does it at night and Jared does it on Thursday, is you say to people, just do it and find out what the response is, and then deal with that response. And then over a period of time, you will get 4 or 5 responses. You don't get too many more. Like, people are all pretty much similar, and they'll give you similar things. Deal with those responses, and then you've got a game. That's a pretty cool thing. I'm excited to see. I'm looking forward to seeing lassos out there and people dealing with them, because they're actually difficult to deal with. You get them stuck on your arm, and your arm's stuck in there, and you're trying to counter the balance, and all of a sudden, it's difficult. So that's pretty cool.
So I'll probably sum it all up with a bit of a bit of a closing thought, which is I think the way that I would like you to think about controlling the corners is when particularly like martial artists and different kind of martial arts start talking about like, I've made them make a mistake, and like I've capitalized on the mistake, and I've used leverage or whatever else against them. Like, yeah, that's happening. But I think the difference between let's call it a situation, like the difference between just us pushing chi power on someone and then falling over because of our chi power, and trying to sweep someone who's actively resisting. I think the difference is like you're doing it in a safe situation. So if I try to sweep someone and it doesn't work, I'm not so out of position that I'm done. So you want to be like, hey, I hit a sweep, but I always have a way of coming back and just keeping my face and safe. Yeah, like I'm not going to get completely unwound by attempting anything. And so it's probably another useful way to think of that, control the squares, control the corners, is if I attempt something and it goes a bit awry, the first thing I think about is, hey, hit the air brakes, control those corners again, like rebuild my guard, get myself back to a nice, safe position and run that whole sequence again. And probably if you think back to the video, like there's a couple of times where Merigali like goes to do a sweep, Bjj fights, counters, and then that next kind of 10, 15 seconds or so is Merigali like rebuilding his guard and getting himself back into a safe position and then running his offense again. And so it's like, hey, attack, it might not work, but the process of attacking doesn't put me so out of position that I'm done. And I think that's like the idea of that sort of attacking responses is, yeah, you want to be attacking responses, but you also don't want to go so far down the road and so out of position that I end up with belly down, face down, and I've followed 12 different counters, but I'm in this horrid position. You want to be like attack, counter. Nah, that didn't go well. Safety, back, build my guard, and I'm cool again. And I think if you think about rolling really good guys, like they'll do some stuff, and sometimes you'll counter it. Like particularly as you get a bit better, you're like, oh, I countered that, I didn't get swept, but nothing ever comes of it. You never feel like, oh, I stopped that bad thing from happening, and now I'm ahead. You're like, I'm still in the same shitty guard, still getting broken down, still dealing with all the same problems. And so I feel like it almost feels like a bit of a dead end, right? Like you get attacked, you do everything to counter it, you use up a heap of energy, get yourself back into some semblance of decent position, and then you're back exactly where you were again. And so from a guard player's perspective, understanding I'm offensive, but then when things start to break down, the number one thing to do is to go back, control those corners, get my guard back in place. And my guard is control of corners, breaking posture, getting them bladed, whatever the case may be. And so the two things I want you to take away from this, sorry, brain's going a million miles out. The two things I want to take away from this are, number one, you can use the understanding of those four corners to figure out what guard you should probably be going to, or like where there's a hole in your guard. And the second is, as your guard gets broken down and attacked, it should prioritize you to go, hey, I'm running out of control points. Nothing else matters. Just get control points back. I'm going down to 2 points of control. I need 3. I've got that. I feel good. I can attack. Oh, I'm down to 1 point of control. There is no attacking. There's no offense. There's just controlling my opponent again. And I think if you've got that kind of decision-making process built in, which those 4 points of control can do for you, then I think it makes your guard a lot more viable. And it's not just like I attack, my guard gets taken to pieces, and it either works or it doesn't. You're either swept or I'm passed. Like you don't want that. You don't want that sort of like all or nothing game. You want that like ability to attack and attack and attack and be able to learn from their responses. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say on the subject. Cool. Any other thoughts or questions?
Just another thought.
Send it.
Could that also be a way to pass the guard? Like if you're thinking about their controls on yourself, trying to strip away their controls on the corners to then set up your pass if you're already entangled into their guard.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So passing is the antithesis of guard play, right? Like if I am completely out of position and have horrible posture, it's not a good time for me to go running past this person's guard. I'll get swept. I want to break all those things, get into a position where they have almost nothing on me, and then pass. And there's a tiny little clip that I didn't get to where you can see what's his name? The dude in the white, Merigali, trying to get grips, and Bjj just like, nah, don't touch anything. And it's like 30 seconds of them just like slapping each other's hands until some action picks up. And so, yeah, perfect, man. Like if you think of it in the same vein, then it makes sense what you need to get to pass. Right. If you're tied up in someone's guard, don't pass, break the controls, get your corners back, then pass. Cool. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, just to add to that. Sorry, I know everyone probably wants to go, but yeah. So if I'm a guard player, I'm going for the 4 points of control. If the guy's passing, he would like to have, like, obviously 4 points of control means that I'm well and truly dominating. 2 points of control or less means that the guard passer is it's kind of equal. Like it's kind of like, oh, you've got 2 and I've got 2. I want if I'm passing, I want 2 or less. And if there's 4 points of control on me and I'm passing, I'm like, shit, I'm not going to pass. So that's exactly 100%, Jarrah, exactly that. You are going, no, I'm not giving you 4 points of control. I'm giving you 2, because you can't stop everything. So they might have a foot in. Okay, yep, you've got one, but I don't want you to have two. If you got 4 points of control, that's pretty awesome, really. Like you're well on the way of being swept. So yeah, so four is good for the guard person. Two or less is good for the passer. You know what I mean? That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it a nice way. Like you go watch the Mendes brothers passing, or you watch any sort of jiu-jitsu tournament, you watch, the person you're interested in and have a look at what they're doing as far as points of control. Like if you want to watch, Lucas Leprage pass, he doesn't pass just completely strung out. He's got everything and then he goes. Or if you want to watch them play their guard game, when they actually hit their sweeps or whatever, they've got all their controls. It's not out of this kind of like half done position. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. Good job, mate. That was excellent.
All good. Hope everyone learned something. Hope that was worthwhile. Adrian's just got a photo of him. Oh, no, he blinked. He's all right. He's still there. He's posting photos of himself. Yeah, I was there.
Oh, look, what this is doing, you're covering off on, you and Richie are covering off on good topics that everyone can learn from. And, we don't sit around and talk about this. We don't sit around after class and you give us your thoughts on Lasso and Richie does and I do, and then people listen. We don't have time, but we're making the time. We're using this time. We've got no other choice to actually sit around and go, you know what do we think? And I think this was wonderful. Good job.
That's all right. Thanks for organising it, Trav. Sorted. All right, gentlemen. I will stop recording. Oh, yeah. And I'll